Imagine buying a house, thinking it's a shared dream, only to find yourself locked out of your own property for an entire year. This is exactly what happened in one of the most intense cases ever to hit Judge Judy's courtroom. It starts with a simple question. If you aren't married, but you bought a house together, who actually owns it? Today we are diving deep into the explosive dispute between Ms. Meadows and Mr. Gustafson. They lived together as a couple for a long time and decided it was time to settle down in a home of their own. But as we quickly learn, their definitions of together are worlds apart. Ms. Meadows claims they bought it as a unit. Mr. Gustafson, however, points to the deed. His name is the only one on it. In the eyes of the law, that makes it his house, plain and simple. The tension in the room is palpable from the very first second. Judge Judy, known for her no-nonsense approach, immediately notices Ms. Meadows' 17-year-old son, Gavin, sitting in the courtroom. Sensing that the details of this case are about to get not pretty, she asks him to step outside. When Judge Judy tells you to clear the room, you know things are about to get real. The background of this case is a legal nightmare. Just 2 months after moving into their new $206,000 home, the relationship hit a breaking point. Ms. Meadows filed for a protective order against Mr. Gustafson, effectively kicking him out of his own house. And here's the kicker. That order lasted for almost a year while the case wound its way through the court system. Imagine being responsible for a mortgage on a house you aren't even allowed to enter. Judge Judy starts digging into the financials, and this is where the story starts to shift. Ms. Meadows, a hairdresser and leather worker, claimed she earned about $20,000 that year. Mr. Gustafson, a union carpenter, earned $72,000. The down payment on the house, a mere $1,000. The mortgage, $205,000, all in Mr. Gustafson's name. He was the one legally and financially responsible for every cent. Yet he was the one living elsewhere for a year while Ms. Meadows stayed in the home. But why was he kicked out? Ms. Meadows alleges there was an assault. Judge Judy, sharp as ever, asks for the medical records. The answer? There are none. No hospital visits, no injuries, just allegations. This is the core of Mr. Gustafson's counterclaim. He isn't just defending himself. He is suing for lost wages, attorney fees, and punitive damages, claiming the restraining order was based on false pretenses. He also alleges that when he finally regained access to his home, his property had been vandalized. As the proceedings continue, Judge Judy demands to see the specific allegations made in February 2016 that led to Mr. Gustafson's removal. She wants to know exactly what was said to justify keeping a man away from his own property for 12 months. Ms. Meadows tries to pivot, claiming that the document in question isn't the one that actually got him removed, leading to a moment of classic Judge Judy frustration. This case is a massive wake-up call about the legal realities of unmarried couples buying property. In states like Minnesota, if you aren't married, there is no community property. If your name isn't on that deed, you are essentially a guest, no matter how much you feel like a partner. We are seeing a battle of, she said, with hundreds of thousands of dollars and a person's reputation on the line. Was it a legitimate protective order or a calculated move to take control of a house? The evidence is starting to lean in a very specific direction, and Judge Judy is not about to let anyone slide with a half-truth. This is only the beginning of this saga. The web of accusations regarding vandalism, legal fees, and the truth behind that initial restraining order is just starting to unravel. What happens when the court finally sees those original allegations? Does Ms. Meadows have any legal standing at all to claim rights to a house she doesn't own? The stakes are high, the tempers are short, and the legal lessons are brutal. Stay tuned, because this courtroom drama is far from over. Judge Judy starts exactly where she left off, demanding the truth. She reads directly from the complaint where Ms. Meadows wrote that in February 2016, Mr. Gustafson started drinking, became violent, and was removed from the house via a restraining order. But when asked point-blank if this was the truth, a mistake, or a flat-out lie, Ms. Meadows starts to stumble. She tries to deflect, saying that was then, but Judge Judy isn't having it. She wants the proof, the allegations, the medical records, anything that justifies kicking a man out of his own property. While Ms. Meadows frantically digs through her papers, The financial reality of the situation comes to light. For the 10 months that Mr. Gustafson was barred from his own home, guess who was paying the mortgage? He was. Guess who was paying the property taxes? He was. Meanwhile, Ms. Meadows and her children were living there rent-free and mortgage-free. Ms. Meadows tries to claim she made payments, but then immediately backtracks, saying she only paid for the first month because he changed the passwords. Judge Judy sees right through it. This wasn't about safety. It was about leverage. She points out that domestic violence is an atrocious thing that she takes very seriously, which is exactly why she despises it when people circumvent the process to get a leg up in a property dispute. Because they weren't married, there was no divorce court to settle this. By filing that restraining order, Ms. Meadows effectively seized a $200,000 asset without spending a dime of her own money on the debt. The cost of this legal warfare is staggering. Ms. Meadows paid her lawyer $2,000. Mr. Gustafson? He's already out $7,000 and still owes another $10,000. The math is simple and brutal. He was being bled dry. He was paying for a house he couldn't live in and a lawyer he could no longer afford, while she stayed put, waiting him out. 10 months into this standoff, Mr. Gustafson finally broke. He called her and said, "My lawyer quit. You won." He simply didn't have the money to keep fighting in court while carrying the weight of the house. This is the moment Ms. Meadows had been waiting for. She tells Judge Judy she wanted to make a deal. Her plan? To buy the house from him for the original purchase price plus whatever he'd put into it. But Judge Judy hits her with a cold dose of reality. How exactly does a hairdresser making $20,000 a year plan to get a $200,000 mortgage? In a post-2008 world, banks aren't exactly lining up to hand out loans to people with that income-to-debt ratio. The deal was a fantasy, a way to keep the charade going while Mr. Gustafson remained homeless and broke. The audacity of the situation is clear. We have a homeowner who was forced out by an allegation that has no medical backing, forced to pay for his replacement's lifestyle, and then offered a deal to sell his own home to someone who couldn't possibly afford it. But the documents are finally coming out, and the vandalism claims are about to take center stage. What did Mr. Gustafson find when he finally got back into his house? And what was really in those February 2016 allegations that started this whole mess? The mask is slipping, and Judge Judy is about to deliver a reality check that Ms. Meadows never saw coming. The story is far from over. We still have the final verdict and the fallout of a year-long legal occupation to cover as the case unfolds. We realize this wasn't just one single restraining order. There were two, separated by an entire year of legal chaos. Judge Judy, with her 40 years of experience in family and small claims law, sees exactly what happened. She calls out Ms. Meadows' strategy: file a restraining order, keep the owner out of his own house, and let the lawyers adjourn the case over and over again while you live there for free. But then, a twist happens in early 2017. Ms. Meadows claims they reconciled. After a year of legal war, they started sleeping together again in January. But here is the thing. They were sleeping together in his house. Mr. Gustafson made it clear he wasn't coming back if there was a restraining order hanging over his head. So, in February 2017, Ms. Meadows signed the application to withdraw the order as a show of good faith. But the peace didn't last. Almost immediately after the order was dropped, Ms. Meadows claims Mr. Gustafson started getting weird again. She alleges he was drinking, pushing, shoving, and even shutting off the gas. She called 911 3 separate times and accused him of breaking into the house. Judge Judy stops her right there. How can a man break into his own house? Ms. Meadows argues that because she had changed the locks and was living there, it was her space. But Judge Judy hits her with a label that no one wants to hear: squatter. If you live in a place that isn't yours and you don't pay rent, you are a squatter. Plain and simple. Ms. Meadows tries to fight back with a legal term she clearly doesn't understand. She tells Judge Judy, "I have equitable rights." In the world of law, equitable distribution usually applies to married couples. Since they were never married, Judge Judy shuts that argument down instantly. There are no equitable rights for a girlfriend who lived in a house for 2 months before kicking the owner out. Then comes the final financial breakdown. Ms. Meadows claims she put money into the house. Judge Judy asks for the specific amount she contributed during those first 2 months, before the first restraining order. The answer? $1,900. Think about that math for a second. She contributed less than $2,000. Yet she stayed in a $200,000 home for nearly a year while Mr. Gustafson paid the mortgage and the taxes from the outside. She essentially bought a year of housing for her and her children for the price of a single month's rent, all while the actual owner was being bled dry by legal fees and a mortgage he couldn't enjoy. This case serves as a massive warning. It shows how the legal system can be used and abused to stall for time and seize control of assets. Ms. Meadows thought she could outlast Mr. Gustafson by using the court system to keep him at bay, but she didn't account for a judge who can spot a leg up strategy from a mile away. The good faith reconciliation was just another chapter in a long story of property leverage. As the dust settles, it's clear that no amount of lock changing or 911 calls can change the name on a deed. The truth behind the vandalism and the final judgment are coming up next, as Judge Judy prepares to wrap up one of the most frustrating property disputes we've ever seen. The lesson here? Marriage licenses exist for a reason, and if you're buying a house without one, you better make sure your name is on that paper. Otherwise, you might find yourself being called a squatter in front of millions of people. Stick around for the final conclusion and the fallout of this year-long legal nightmare.